Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Karen Weaver. The role of chair of a board of regents at any university is very complex. You must work well with other board members, with the university administration, and work to strengthen the direction of the institution. Being a board chair during a pandemic is one thing, but leading one of the most high-profile universities in the nation during a pandemic and a presidential election is quite another. My guest today is Denise Illich, chair of the University of Michigan Board of Regents. The Board of Regents make major decisions that affect all three of the University of Michigan campuses in Ann Arbor, Flint, and Dearborn. Amongst the many matters decided by the board are tuition rates, approval of professorial appointments, librarians, and the appointment of administrators. Needless to say, the decisions they make have profound impact on the lives of students. Denise has been an integral part of Detroit's business and philanthropic communities for 30 years as a dedicated business leader, devoted community servant, and supporter of many charitable causes. She is also president of Illich Enterprises, LLC, and the co-owner of the 220 Restaurant Hospitality Group. She previously served as president of Illich Holdings, a privately held business that manages such entities as Little Caesar Enterprises, yes, Little Caesar's Pizza, the Detroit Red Wings, the Detroit Tigers, and Olympia Entertainment. She is a very proud first-generation student and graduate of the University of Michigan. The Michigan Regents operate very differently than other university fiduciaries. They run for office and are elected by the citizens of Michigan. Denise first joined the Regents in 2008, and her current term expires in 2025. Wow. We were originally going to have this conversation on April 1st, but as it was opening day, Denise was at the Detroit Tigers home opener in the snow. And Denise, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here with you.
You had some snow last week in Michigan at the Tigers home opener, but now it looks like it's a better day today.
Yeah, I mean, that's Michigan weather. It just changes. It goes from one extreme to another. It was crazy having snow during the opening day, but we won, so it was all worth it.
All worth it when you win. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, you have had, just in reading your background, you've had a long history as a vocal advocate for higher education. You and your family have endowed scholarships at Walsh University and your alma mater, the University of Michigan. Why is this kind of advocacy so important for public universities?
Well, it's first of all, it's a passion of mine, and I feel privileged to have received the education that I personally have had. But I think it's important for public universities because it allows access for those in need doing scholarships. A formal college education is becoming more and more expensive, and access is really important. So I feel strongly about trying to do my part to provide others to get an education. I also think my personal opinion is that many of the problems that we face in society, I think all lead back to education.
Mm-hmm.
I think all roads lead back to education. And so that's why I think it's important that public universities, we advocate for education for public universities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I come from a long line of educators. My mom was a principal and a teacher. My grandfather was a principal and a superintendent. I just totally get that public education is a really necessary commodity.
Yes, very much so. I'm the opposite of you. I was the first, in a sense, I was the first to graduate from college in my family.
Oh.
And my parents didn't go to college. I'm the oldest of seven. So I was the first to venture out and receive a college education.
And it changed your life, which is what we hope so many college degrees do,
Yep, it changed my life and it prepared me for much to come.
Well, speaking of that, you've been a member of the Board of Regents at Michigan since 2008. That's a remarkable thing. And I started diving into your board structure as part of my preparation for a board retreat that you held a month and a half or so ago, and where the board spent a half a day studying some of the emerging trends in college athletics. Tell my listeners about the thinking behind doing board retreats and how they inform your thinking and strategy as a board.
Okay. Well, first, you did a great job, and thank you for participating in the meeting.
Sure.
It's really, board retreats are really helpful to boards in the sense that it helps us govern more effectively. We're able to kind of hit the pause button from the day-to-day business of the university and really sit back and talk about strategy, talk about reputational risk, and really kind of talk about our priorities and plan the year accordingly. We have speakers come and talk to us about sharing trend, and they share trends with us about best practices, kind of what's happening, what I would say on the ground in real time. And so we have time to really brainstorm, share ideas, and plan for the future. Some of our issues that we face are very complex. And so it allows us time to really talk about the complex issues and set the goals for the future, set policy for the future, and then of course, team building. As with any retreat in an organization, team building and improving communication amongst the board and with the administration is also very helpful.
I think that's really critical. And again, remind our listeners how the Board of Regents at Michigan is chosen.
Well, we are somewhat unusual in that we are statewide elected officials. So we have an 8-year term. And while the business that we do generally remains nonpartisan, we do affiliate with a political party, and then we run with that party.
Got it. So you represent citizens as
Yes.
well as the campus community at large. Is there ever any conflict in feeling how how you represent that?
None come to mind. Generally, we represent the general, the Michigan citizens, and students are part of the citizenry. So we're funded by taxpayer dollars, not 100%, obviously, but we tend to try to represent all. It does get a little complicated sometimes because there's multiple stakeholders.
Yes.
At the university, and you would be really familiar with that: students, faculty, administrators, donors, community people. So, but overall, we try to wear a hat for everyone.
Yeah, and that's not easy. And some of these boards are huge. I mean, I can think of some campuses that have boards as large as 40 or 45 people. So it's nine
It's
people,
8. It's 8
on your board.
Yeah.
You get to know each other pretty well in those meetings, I would think.
We do. I can't imagine a board that large and operating a university, but we get to know one another. Each person is a community leader and highly accomplished in their own right, but it's been very good from a governance standpoint because everyone brings their expertise, their gifts, to the community, to the university, and it's really helpful in having diverse opinions when discussing the issues that we do.
So how much time on a typical board docket, not at a retreat, but a typical board docket, do you spend talking about athletics? Do you have a standing board committee on athletics?
No, and that's such a great thought, a standing committee on athletics. We don't. We have other committees in other areas. I would say we generally, unless there's a crisis or a complex issue, we don't spend too much time on athletics. We review the budget of athletics. We vote on the budget of athletics. We get updates on athletics. We certainly share our thoughts on athletics, but unless there's a major problem or a new issue coming down the pike, we don't spend a whole lot of time on academics. Really, the majority of our time in that area is spent on academic excellence.
Interesting. So the board, did you have much involvement in the decisions to play college football, Big Ten college football last fall? Was that brought to the board?
It was. The president shares with us some of the conversations amongst the presidents with Big Ten. But we always give our opinion. We're not a shy group, that's for sure. But the president and Big Ten really set the policy with respect to last year.
Yeah. So you operate as advisors more than consenters.
Yes,
Yeah.
if we have a really strong feeling and all board members are in agreement, it will influence the president, of course. But generally, that's what we hired the president to do, is to run the day-to-day operation of the university. So we allow him to do that. As you would expect, it's always a balancing act as to what falls into what bucket. But for the most part, that's where we're coming from.
It's refreshing to hear, because I've interviewed other folks on other campuses around the country, and some of them get really frustrated with the amount of meddling that board members do in either the day-to-day operations of the campus or in hiring and firing football coaches. So it's refreshing to hear that the board kind of knows where their boundaries are.
Right. Well, maybe if you asked our president, he'd feel different. I haven't met many presidents that say their board, stays out of their business. It overlaps sometimes, but
Yeah.
really that's our intention, that we always come from that place. I've even seen situations where large donors feel that they can weigh in on
Yes.
your example, hiring a coach or some of the operation of the university, and that's just not something that we do.
So last week was a challenging week for the board in a very public way, and I appreciate your willingness to talk about this to the degree that you can. You had a regent, Ron Weiser, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yes.
Weiser,
Yes.
who I guess his day job is he's the Republican committee chair for the state of Michigan. Do I have that right?
Yes, a co-chair. He has another person that's a co-chair with him.
Okay,
yes.
Who said some unfortunate things about women who are in high positions in the government in Michigan. Perhaps you could share with us what happened, and then also why the board decided to get involved.
Well, it was a very difficult week. What he had made some remarks at a political event, and he was recorded while he was making the remarks. So basically, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, so any of the listeners that are interested, look up exactly the words. But basically, we have three female leaders in our community, the governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state. And he was talking about them in the election in 2022. And he referred to them as witches, and the three witches, and then, softening it up so that they can be burned at the stake. He then made a remark. Somebody in the audience said, "What about our witches?" And there are two Republican congressmen or political officials that voted that the election was accurate, that it wasn't rigged. And so he said, "Look, I don't know what you expect me to do. You've got to work at trying to unseat them. Other than assassinating them, I can't tell you what else to do." Something along those lines. I won't have the exact words. And so a firestorm broke out, and really in the community. The video was released publicly, and we received hundreds of emails and calls from our community asking for his resignation. He eventually, it took 2 days, but he eventually apologized, and it was, some would characterize as, sort of an apology. Wasn't really a heartfelt apology, which really, enraged the community again. Mm. And so, as a result, the board made a decision to hold a special meeting and to pass a resolution for his resignation. And he was also removed from his committee membership. So he was a member of two committees and was removed from that. And I think the decision that was made by the board, we had one board member abstain, and he himself was not, he was present for a little bit of it, but did not vote. So I think that the board felt that it had crossed a line. Mm-hmm. and that there was a very significant conflict between being a political party chair and being a board of regent. He just, obviously is unable and was unable to manage the conflict in his public life with this. So it was really unfortunate.
I really felt for you in that situation, because it's tough enough when you're any board, but when you're a board that's elected by the citizens of the state, it had to be it had to have so many layers of difficulty. And I think one step you tried was censuring. Did that actually go through?
Well, we never used that word,
Okay.
and I think that was more of a public word. It was not part of the resolution. The resolution was basically, and it was read into the record, basically outlining kind of the conduct and then asking for his resignation. Now, on our board in Michigan and Michigan law, we can't remove a public official, a publicly elected official, unless there's a recall or the governor has the ability to remove. And there are layers. It's a really good point of yours that it injects a lot of politics because he is a party chair. And so it made it that much more complicated.
Yeah, very, very, very difficult situation coming off of a very difficult presidential election and all kinds of other issues,
Yeah.
the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah.
Right. One thing I was really proud of, though, is that, 1 in 3 women experience some kind of violence. And generally, it's women who have to complain about it, report that kind of thing. It was refreshing to see all of my male colleagues um, represent kind of what's right and wrong and acknowledge that that kind of violent rhetoric um, leads to violent acts. And so that was a silver lining, I guess, to me.
We talk a lot about that in so many aspects of life, not standing by and letting others get away with that kind of
Yes.
talk or get away with
Mhm,
that kind of behavior. So
mhm.
particularly in a professional setting where there's already enough challenges in being a board member, to have colleagues step up like that,
Right.
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was the first time we've experienced a special meeting on this subject matter in 200 years
Wow.
in our history.
So being that you're in that position, do you have any advice or guidance for trustees or presidents from other institutions if they come into some sort of a similar politically fraught situation?
Well, I think it's really important for boards to deal with issues of conflict, either through the bylaws or whatever their format is, so that it's very clear what they consider a conflict and what they don't consider a conflict. I do think that board trustees should think about before they join a board. Um, am I doing anything that is in conflict? And am I prepared to say no to requests of any kind of role that I might take on that may conflict with the current role that I have? I also think it's important that boards have a code of conduct
Mm.
or a code of ethics um, so that everyone is in agreement as to what is the proper conduct. I think, or a standard of behavior. I also think it's important for universities to think about when they name buildings. And we certainly thought about it in the sports business when we built Comerica Park. And obviously it took on, the name of a bank. But think about, are there standards of behavior in the donor agreements when you have naming rights? And think about, should there be more than one? If you have 7 buildings on your campus with a name and then something occurs, how does the university, something bad occurs, how does the university feel about that? And then just to talk about the incompatibility of roles. Maybe it's not a legal conflict, but it is incompatible. And I think boards should be very transparent about, how they feel about that,
Yeah.
and what is the best way with which to deal with that, so you are the most effective board member you can be.
And you could even add endowed chairs or endowed head coaching
Yes,
positions, those kinds of things
yes,
as well.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yes.
Obviously, Michigan's a part of the Big Ten, and I'm curious as to whether you interact much with the other Big Ten board chairs, and if so, how does that happen?
Not really. I don't really interact with them. I am attending I think it's next week, as a matter of fact, the National Conference on Trusteeship, which is by AGB, which is the Association of Governing Boards in Universities and Colleges. And many times I will meet, of course, we're in COVID now, so it's all virtual, but in the past, we interact with all different people. In different capacities and positions at universities, but nothing formal.
Interesting. Um, the reason I ask is that the Big Ten has this remarkable, and I don't know how many other Power Five conferences have this, but remarkable ability to gather like-minded positions and have them meet regularly. So the presidents will meet, the ADs will meet, the compliance officers will meet, the financial aid officers will meet, but the board chairs don't meet. That's interesting.
No, I mean, maybe there's something out there that I'm not familiar with. I'd be really interested to do that. Because boy, we would have a lot to talk about and share ideas. I'm just not familiar with any.
Interesting. We should put that on our agenda.
Yes.
Well, listen, based on our conversation with the retreat, you all are obviously keenly aware that college athletics is facing some serious headwinds and also facing very real change that could happen as early as this summer.
Yes.
Um, how are you preparing for that in relation to maintaining success across all Michigan sports and also adjusting to the increasing likeliness that athletes will be even more of an equal partner than they've been in the past?
Yes. Well, first of all, we're trying to learn as much as we can and try to plan for different scenarios. And I think that the biggest area of change will be the financial implications. And so it's critical that universities obviously talk about that and plan for that. That's our biggest area. But it's also, how are we going to operate? There'll be new issues that will come up. I do have experience from the professional sports point of view. And so I think it's been helpful that I've been able to share the experience professionally, on a professional basis, to start to think about some of the issues that come up that you don't really anticipate at the time of the change. There's staffing, there's all kinds of issues. So it's been helpful. We've been planning, but one never can plan 100% till we know exactly what is going to change. And that hasn't as yet been determined.
And Michigan signed a names, images, and likenesses piece of legislation, right? So that is law
Yes.
now in Michigan.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that will force your thinking in a way because you'll have to comply with state law.
Yes, that's true. That's true. For that, we will plan accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, you are a remarkable person in terms of just your knowledge and breadth of understanding of the sports business, but also your commitment to higher education. And I congratulate Michigan on electing you board chair, because it's really a unique and important role at a unique and important time. So, Denise, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weaver. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
It's been great to have you.
Thank you.